Okay, we're back in Psalms. Psalm 49 is where we are today. Psalm 49. And let's just start by reading through it. Psalm 49. To the chief musician, a psalm for the sons of Korah. Hear this, all ye people. Give ear, all ye inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor, together. My mouth shall speak of wisdom, and the meditation of my heart shall be of understanding. I will incline mine ear to a parable. I will open my dark saying upon the harp. Wherefore should I fear in the days of evil, when the iniquity of my heels shall compass me about? They that trust in their wealth and boast themselves in the multitude of their riches. None of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. For the redemption of their soul is precious, and it ceaseth forever. That he should still live forever, and not see corruption. For he seeth that wise men die, likewise the fool and the brutish person perish, and leave their wealth to others. Their inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. Nevertheless, man, being in honor, abideth not. It's like the beasts that perish. This their way is their folly. Yet their posterity approve their sayings, Selah. Like sheep they are laid in the grave, death shall feed upon them. The upright shall have dominion over them in the morning, and their beauty shall consume in the grave from their dwelling. But God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave, for he shall receive me, Selah. Be not thou afraid when one is made rich, when the glory of his house increased. For when he dieth, he shall carry nothing away. His glory shall not descend after him. Though while he lived, he blessed his soul, and men will praise thee when thou doest well to thyself. He shall go to the generation of his fathers. They shall never see light. Man that is in honor and understandeth not is like the beasts that perish. Okay. This is one of those psalms that has an almost Ecclesiastes sound to it, doesn't it? It's a little different than the rest of the psalms in tone, but it's a psalm that teaches, and it teaches the vanity of worldly wealth. There is a deception that prevails through the wealth of man, right? And a sense of security that comes with it that can be deceiving about things that matter the most. And so I don't have a real long introduction on this, just we'll kind of cover it as we go along, but this psalm is an encouragement to all who find themselves in an unfortunate position in life when compared to others. For often those who are struggling financially or find themselves in a position of seeming insecurity or real insecurity based on finances, and then see that others have security based on finances, and they think that the finances are the answer, when in reality, a lot of times they're the symptom for either the rich or the poor. And it serves to remind us, this psalm does, of what is most important in life. And it is certainly not riches and power. So I see that verses 1 through 4 serve as kind of a preface for the psalm. It's almost like an advertisement to make sure you hang on to the end, right? And we see this. Let's just read verses 1 through 4 again. Hear this, all you people. Give ear, all ye inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom, and the meditation of my heart shall be of understanding. I will incline mine ear to a parable. I will open my dark sayings upon the harp. Verse 5, you might see verse 5 kind of continues the advertisement, if you will. But these first two verses, verses 1 and 2, are the announcement to the world and of its people that what is to follow is of great benefit. And he doesn't parse words in this at all. I read one commentator that said the psalmist was downright pompous in his declaration of how good this was going to be. And kind of like me do a sermon and I'm like, oh boy, you guys are this is going to be so good. This is what I'm about to tell you is going to be just the depth of the greatest wisdom. And I mean, he's selling it, right? And so I can understand why the commentator would say that. He's wrong, but you can understand the tone that he read it in. The first thing I see is that he's making the claim that these words will benefit all people, right? You can see that in verses 1 and 2. Hear this, all you people. Give ear, all ye inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together, right? This isn't just targeted to a few. This isn't one of those things that will only benefit a few. This teaching on wealth and power and its place in the life of a believer is profitable no matter where you are on the financial scale. And quite frankly, I think we tend to think of teaching on finances that we find throughout Scripture, and it's a very prevalent theme throughout Scriptures, the right view of finances, and partly because wealth can be deceptive. But we tend to think of it as for those who haven't excelled in finance so that they might, But very often, it is actually pointing out to those who have excelled in finance that they have excelled in something that matters not at all because they failed in the things that are most important. And I think we see some of that in this as well. The call to the low and the high, the rich and the poor, it's a tacit claim that the benefits of the following wisdom equally apply. And we tend to demonize or to degrade the one end of that spectrum or the other, right? Depending on where you are or a particular stand that you take, right? I'm trying not to bring the word politics into it, but sometimes where you stand politically decides whether you're going to demonize one end or the other, as if being on one end or the other has anything to do with your morality. But in reality, the same advice is profitable to either the rich or the poor. The same temptations and the same bad attitudes are attractive to the rich as to the poor in regard to finances, in regard to wealth and power. The same focus on wealth and riches as being overly essential tend to overtake the low or the high, the rich or the poor. And the psalmist continues the extolling of his own exhortation here in the coming verses, but he puts forward next, it's not the pompous promise of a prideful man. It's the true advertisement of value is what he's putting out here. He's advertising truth. I can remember growing up and reading a claim made by some advertiser and thinking, wow, that is amazing. And it's got to be true because there's no way they'd be able to print that. Someone would sue them. And how naive, right? And I was so sure that was the case. I was thinking, wow, that is amazing. That must be true because there's no way someone would be able to falsely advertise because they would get in trouble. They'd have no reputation anymore. And I didn't go into advertising, but But what he has here, he can't oversell this. This is true advertisement of value for the wisdom he's about to put forward. And what the psalmist presents here is wisdom that's at the level of a doctorate degree. And that's where I have this next point in the preface, and that is that these words are wise and they're a product of higher learning, right? The institutions of higher learning are rightfully disparaged nowadays, right? Because you can pay an awful lot and not get what you paid for. Right? You get a brand, and it turns out that brand doesn't mean what it used to mean. Right? This is like the actual product of higher learning, right? You invest in the wisdom of this psalm, in learning it and applying it in your life. You will have gotten what you paid for. My mouth shall speak of wisdom, verse 3, and the meditation of my heart shall be of understanding. I will incline mine ear to a parable. I will open my dark sayings upon the harp. He speaks here not only to the value of the message he's about to teach, but doesn't it look to you like in verse 4, I'm also going to say it in a way that you are going to love. Right? I mean, he says, I will incline my ear to a parable. I will open my dark sayings upon a harp. This is going to be musical. It's going to be attractive. The psalmist recognizes that what he has prepared is of the highest level of wisdom. You see that in verse 3. And that over which he's meditated in the presence of God, he distinguishes as understanding, right? Which is, it's an acknowledgement of all related truth, and it's a contextualization of all observations. This is understanding. He's not just putting something out there that he doesn't understand fully. He contextualizes it. And he promises to set his teaching forward in the relatable and accessible pattern of parable. He says, I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to give this in parable. So some of what he says is obviously not to be taken literally in a spiritual sense, but he puts it forward in a parable that is very clear from the perspective that we hear it. And then he means to set forward these deep truths in accompaniment with the harp. I will open my dark sayings, that is, these things that are so deep and so wise that most people don't know them. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to play my harp while I tell you. And and that with which he begins is the promise that these truths result in an assuagement of inordinate fear. Well, that's good. There's a lot of things in this world of which we tend to be afraid and think that wealth and power will make us less afraid, right? And what he's saying is that what I'm going to tell you is really what will keep you from having to fear evil. So my first point is that there's nothing to fear in evil. We see this in verse 5. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying, it's so awkwardly worded, and I wrote it, so I have no one to blame but myself. But what I mean by this, there's nothing to fear in evil. I don't mean like, oh, well, you can kind of play around with it. It's not dangerous. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we need not react to the evil that we see around us, the evil of things falling apart in our lives or whatever. We need not react to the evil that is around us by hoarding wealth and power. You know, that's the world's solution. Is if I just have enough wealth and power, then the evil in the world, I'm going to be protected from it, right? And there's a lot of evil that might drive us to the solution of wealth and power. And so he begins by making this argument as part of his selling point here in verse 5, is that there's nothing to fear in evil, even though evil can be deceiving. Let's read verse 5. We already read verse 4. Wherefore should I fear in the days of evil, when the iniquity of my heels shall compass me about? Okay, so the first thing we see is that rhetorical. Verse 5 is a rhetorical question, right? The primary body of that question is that first clause, wherefore should I fear in the days of evil? And he means to point this out. Wherefore should I fear means I should not be fearing, right? It's a rhetorical question. The answer to it is you shouldn't. Wherefore should I fear? The answer to that is you shouldn't, right? So it's a rhetorical question to point out how this fear in the days of evil that he's talking about here, it's an inordinate fear. It's a fear that's not ordained by God. There is one fear that is ordained by God. What is it? The fear of God, right? And so then the condition of this fear that he so questions is that there's a deceiving and a surrounding factor to the evil in the world. All right, now here's the part that needs a little bit of explanation. Wherefore should I fear in the days of evil, when the iniquity of my heels shall compass me about? Now, that's difficult phrasing. You can read through that a few more times and try to figure out what it means, and still not quite get it without doing a little bit of research. The iniquity of my heels is a phrase that speaks of supplanting or deception, being trapped, being, if you will, tripped up, as if someone is reaching for the heel and grabbing it. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Didn't we just read through that in the Bible? Right? And Jacob reached out and grabbed Esau's heel, right? And that's why he was called a supplanter, I think, Jacob. Right? All right, so it's been posited that maybe that's how this idiom became to be common to refer to that which might reach out unawares and snag you and trip you up or grab you, a supplanter, if you will. And I think that seems to me to be the best explanation of this use, right? So let's just read that again. Wherefore should I fear in the days of evil? Well, you shouldn't. When the iniquity of my heels shall compass me about. In other words, although evil can be deceiving, it can trip you up. It can sneak up behind you and grab your ankle while you're trying to make progress in the world. That's what evil can do. And do I need to fear evil? When this is possible, when the iniquity of my heels is compassing me about. And then there's the compass me about part. It's one thing when you know where the danger is coming from. It's another thing when you realize it's everywhere, right? There's not just one sector from which the iniquity of my heels comes. It's all over the place. And that's what I mean by although it is deceiving and although it is surrounding, shall compass me about. Wherefore should I fear in the days of evil, when the iniquity of my heels shall compass me about? Well, the point here is that there's nothing to fear in evil that would drive you to seek wealth and power as a solution. All right? So see my point, there's nothing to fear in evil. In the context of this psalm, which is about wealth and power. Okay, so there's nothing to fear from evil that would drive me to seek wealth and power. But you can see why I didn't put that as the point. I would have filled 2-3 lines with that. So the second point I want to point out there is verses 6 through 14. Riches cannot purchase redemption. And here's where he kind of narrows the focus down so that we might recognize what matters in life. You should not. There's no evil in the world that should drive you to seek wealth and power as a reaction, as a purpose in life to avoid to avoid the evil in the world. You should not be in reaction to the evil in the world, seeking wealth and power. And then he speaks to what really matters. Riches cannot purchase redemption. Verses 6 through 9, I just want to read those first, and then we'll get the rest of them. in this 6 through 14 section. Verses 6 through 9 says, "They that trust in their wealth and boast themselves in the multitude of their riches, none of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him, that he should still live forever and not see corruption." Did y'all notice I skipped verse 8? Okay, I did that because there's parentheses around it, right? Now, it belongs in there, and we're going to address the parentheses. It's a point of its own. But I wanted you to see how that thought flows. The parentheses is meant to be taken out so that you might understand how the thought flows, and then you stick it back in and apply the lesson of the parenthetical statement. That's just how parentheses work. It's a little grammar lesson for you. It's free, no extra charge. And they that trust in their wealth and boast themselves in the multitude of their riches, there are those who think that they can rustle up enough earthly stability as to create eternal security. He says, none of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. See, even if their resources were to be spent selflessly on the redemption of another, they have not the means. You cannot gather enough wealth in this world to redeem anyone. So then suddenly the importance of wealth and power is way down on the priority list, because you cannot purchase redemption. And redemption is way more important than anything else. So, what is said parenthetically? For the redemption of their soul is precious, and it ceaseth forever. That parenthetical statement, there's two sections of it. For the redemption of their soul is precious, which is why it could never be redeemed by what you earn in a paycheck or the power that you garner, right? So the redemption of a soul is precious. It's way more precious than all you could earn in a lifetime, even if you're really good at earning, right? You could not get enough power to force redemption, because redemption of a soul is precious. And all, explaining what that last phrase means, last clause, and all that you could earn and all the power that you could accumulate in life will cease forever. That's why you could never buy redemption, because that ceaseth forever. You put that, everything that you've amassed in a lifetime and all the power that you've accumulated, and you put that out there on a table and you say, I just want to redeem one soul. And as soon as you take your hands off of it, it ceaseth forever, because it is of no value in heaven, in eternity. So what is said parenthetically to cease forever in verse 8, it's not the soul of the one whose soul is not being redeemed, is not redeemed. It's the attempted ransom paid for that soul, right? Verse 9 indicates the aim of the one who might try to redeem the soul of a man with earthly means. He said that he should still live forever and not see corruption. That's why you would be trying to pay this ransom for him, right? From verse 7. You would be trying to pay this ransom so that someone might live in eternity. So exactly how this sounds to you and I when we think of redeeming a soul, I mean, you redeem a soul, why? So that it lives forever and doesn't pay the sin debt, because the wages of sin is death, right? So it's exactly the way it sounds. And he's saying that's what you would want to be doing. You'd want to be paying for this soul to live forever and not see corruption. And yet, you can't earn that much, because the soul is precious. And then your payment, it ceaseth forever. Okay, verse 10 now. And we'll read verses 10 through 14 now, and then we'll we'll show some of the reasons why riches cannot purchase redemption. For he seeth that wise men die. Likewise the fool and the brutish person perish, and leave their wealth to others. Their inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. Man has always done this, right? It's in the brand on the rear end of the cattle, right? We put our names on everything. And we hope that in perpetuity it will always be known as Josh Marderson's thing. Whatever. And it's just a thing that man does. It's in our nature. Nevertheless, man, being in honor, abideth not. He's like the beasts that perish. This their way is their folly. Yet their posterity approve their sayings. Selah. Like sheep, they are laid in the grave. Death shall feed on them, and the upright shall have dominion over them in the morning. And their beauty shall consume in the grave from their dwelling. We see two reasons here why riches cannot purchase redemption. One of them is riches cannot purchase redemption because their wealth and fame is only temporary. Right? To understand verse 10 in context, we might say that he who finds that he cannot purchase redemption finds this realization for the following first reason. For you see it that wise men die. Likewise the fool and the brutish person perish, and they leave their wealth to others. This wealth and fame, it's only temporary. One cannot procure what is eternal with that which is temporary. No matter who it is, wealth and fame continues not in eternity. So, wise men, fool, brutish person, wealth and fame fades away. The second reason we see here is riches cannot purchase redemption, starting in verse 11, because wealth and fame earned on this earth stays on this earth. Right? It doesn't go up into heaven. And the truth is expressed in the obviously false assumption of the fool who thinks to buy the soul's redemption with earthly means. In verse 11, this obviously false assumption of the fool is their inward thought is that their houses shall continue forever, and their dwelling places to all generations, and they call their lands after their own names. And they just think that when it comes down to it, they're going to get up into heaven. They're going to say, oh, hey, God, well, you know it's me. You can see my ranch down there. You know, it's got my name on it. And so I'll just be coming into your ranch. It doesn't work that way. Right? It all stays down there. None of it can be brought up into heaven. And they think of building kingdoms on earth that will last while they're ignoring the rules of the kingdom of God that is eternal and heavenly. So this inward thought, their houses are going to continue forever, that they're dwelling places to all generations, and they call their lands after their own names, and none of that. That's them they're responding to the fear that is in the world, the fear of evil, and they're saying, well, I'm going to find my stability and my security in this wealth and in this power. When it all comes down to it, I will get up there with that great king. Me and God, we're kind of like equals. I got my little kingdom. He's got his kingdom, you know. And he's just going to say, come on in. I mean, it sounds pretty silly. Even sounds almost like I'm going to get struck by lightning by saying it here. Right? But there's another truth that we see here in verse 12. And it is, fame, sans mortality, doesn't distinguish us from beasts of the field. Fame, I'm just trying to sound fancy, so I said sans instead of without. You get that? vocabulary insertion there. I'm not sure why I wrote it that way. Fame without immortality doesn't distinguish us from the beasts of the field. That's something, though, isn't it? We think that, well, if I can gain a reputation and honor in this world, then that will last forever. But if you don't have immortality, you're no different than a beast of the field as far as that goes. Being in honor speaks of fame. Nevertheless, man being in honor abideth not. He's like the beasts that perish. Even beasts can be famous. You know what they can't be? They can't be redeemed. To have accomplished fame or riches is no achievement of note beyond what an industrious beast can compile. It's our immortal soul that sets humanity aside and above. We are in the image of God, and we're conscious of righteousness. But we must live in the view of eternity if we're to have success in what matters. And God forbid we should set a pattern of temporary kingdom building and pass it on to our children, this folly. You see that in verse 13. This is their way. This their way is their folly, right? This idea that you can gain all this wealth and power and honor, and that somehow this is what's going to last. And this their way is their folly. And we recognize that this their way is their folly. But that's not even the saddest part. It's sad. Here's the saddest part. Yet their posterity approve their sayings. Then, if we live that way, building our kingdom on earth and seeking for wealth and power and recognition, honor on earth, we teach our kids that that's what's most important. What's most important is that you do all these things. Their posterity approves their sayings. Do you know why the posterity approves their sayings? Because they're little sinners too. Like everyone, we all have sinned. and we have a nature to believe these kind of things. This approval and admiration of our children, it's something that we crave, and it can be a driving force for good or for evil. And so they continue in this folly, and their kids pick it up. Let's communicate by our lives eternal values that actually matter. And then verse 14, we see that in the resurrection, no riches or fame will avail the foolish. No riches or fame will avail the foolish. Like sheep they are laid in the grave. Death shall feed on them, and the upright shall have dominion over them in the morning, and their beauty shall consume in the grave from their dwelling. So, again, this is from the perspective of earth, right? The life of the wicked and the foolish ends in the grave. Death feeds on them. They have built, and think about this perspective. This is kind of the parabolic aspect of the psalm. That they have spent their life building a kingdom for themselves on earth. They've amassed wealth, and they've amassed power, and they've amassed fame. And so let's just go ahead and apply that rubric, that theory of life to what is left of them on earth when they pass away. How does that work? Like sheep, they are laid in the grave, and death shall feed on them just like everyone else. They put all their kingdom on earth. So let's go ahead and just look at it through the lens of everything on earth is what matters. Well, that's kind of sad in the end, because after you die, death shall feed on them. But there's a second part of verse 14 that's kind of interesting, right? But the upright shall have dominion over them in the morning. What is that? What's the resurrection, right? There will come a time when the righteous, the upright, who haven't spent their lives trying to scavenge together wealth and power and fame on this earth, but rather have sought to build the kingdom of God. Well, how does that end in the end? Well, the Bible teaches us that we will rule and reign on earth. And the upright shall have dominion over them in the morning. And their beauty, those who have worked so hard to maintain their beauty, shall consume in the grave from their dwelling. He who has been redeemed by the only effective means, that would be the cross, and is thereby righteous, this is how he has been redeemed, will rule over them in the end. There is no earthly beauty that will last into eternity. Here's the third point, and that is that God can and does offer redemption. We see it in verses 15 through 20. God can and does offer redemption. Verse 15 through 20 says, "But God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave, for he shall receive me. Selah. Be not thou afraid when one is made rich, when the glory of his house is increased. For when he dieth, he shall carry nothing away. His glory shall not descend after him. Though while he lived, he blessed his soul, and men will praise thee when thou doest well to thyself. He shall go to the generation of his fathers, and they shall never see light. Man that is in honor and understandeth not is like the beasts that perish." In verse 15, we see that God will receive the redeemed. It says, "But God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave, for he shall receive me." The psalmist teaches here that redemption would be paid. The psalmist is making this proclamation that God is going to redeem his soul from the power of the grave. So then he has more hope than the one who has sought to amass wealth and power and fame, but he's never been able to buy redemption. And the psalmist says, "But I have hope in this, that God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave." The word redemption is in itself a financial term. So there's some irony in this. One has spent all their life trying to master finances. But in the end, only one is redeemed. And it's the one who is redeemed by the payment made by another. Because redemption is only through Christ. The psalmist had this hope that God would redeem his soul from the power of the grave, teaching here that the redemption price would be paid. Verse 16, "The redeemed need not fear the power of the rich." He says, so how do you respond to this? With the hope that God will receive the redeemed. You respond to this truth with understanding that the redeemed need not fear the power of the rich. "Be not thou afraid when one is made rich, when the glory of his house is increased." Today, the modern idea is to see those who is made rich, whose glory of their house is increased, and be afraid of that. In other words, think that they have gotten it all by some evil means, and that I should have some of that. Some of that should be mine, right? There's a word for that. It's envy, right? And when we focus on that, when we focus on what the rich has, the power of the rich, and we're afraid of it. In other words, it changes our life. When you fear God, you live your life accordingly, right? When you fear the rich, you live your life accordingly. When you fear the evils of this world, you live your life accordingly, right? And he says, don't be afraid of one that is made rich, when the glory of his house is increased. For when he dieth, verse 17, he shall carry nothing away. His glory shall not descend after him. The redeemed need not fear the power of the rich, because his wealth won't follow him, and because his fame is circumstantial. Verse 18. Though while he liveth, he blessed his soul, and men will praise thee when thou doest well to thyself. That's pretty often the case. While this fellow was alive, building his kingdom on earth, he said, man, I got it made. I got it made in this life and the next. I got enough to spend here and enough to put a deposit on heaven. I mean, I got this, no problem. Feels as safe as can be. And men praise him. Of course you praise him, because he might throw a buck your way, right? And then when you do well for yourself, men will praise thee. That's pretty typical, right? But his fame is only circumstantial. It's only because he has amassed wealth and power that this is his circumstance in life. But his end is eternal darkness. You see this in verse 19. That the redeemed need not fear the power of the rich, because his end is eternal darkness. He shall go to the generation of his fathers, and they shall never see light. And why is that? Because they were never redeemed. Fame without wisdom does not distinguish us from the beasts of the field. And this is kind of the conclusion. Well, I mean, it kind of is the conclusion. It's man that is in honor. That's the man this is someone who is famous and understandeth not. It's like the beasts that perish. He's bringing this simile in from previous in the psalm, obviously, but he's just changed it just a little bit, so that you've got the man that is in honor. This is the person who has the fame. He's got the wealth. He's got the power. He's recognized by everyone else to have accomplished what he set forth to accomplish in life, to be successful and evidently secure and stable. But he doesn't understand that he has put nothing on his redemption price and is like the beasts that perish. In conclusion, if you gain all that this world has to offer in the way of wealth and fame, and yet you do not meet Christ, you have lost everything worth having. And that is Psalm 49.